The CEO who destroyed his life just walked into his bakery as his first customer. A black man lost everything with a single signature, but he refused to stay down. From sleeping in his car to rebuilding his life inside an abandoned bakery, he kept going when no one believed in him. And on the day he finally opened his doors, the first customer to walk in was the same CEO who destroyed his life. But this time, everything was different. Rain fell in a soft, steady rhythm over South Chicago, turning the cracked sidewalks into dark mirrors that reflected flickering streetlights and passing buses. The kind of rain that didn't rush, didn't storm, just stayed, quiet and persistent, like something that had nowhere else to go. Marcus Reed stood at the front door of Rosie's Bakery, his hand resting on the worn brass handle he had spent 3 days polishing with an old rag and determination. The sign above him still leaned slightly to the left. One chain rusted deeper than the other, but it held. Just like everything else inside. He took a breath. The air smelled like fresh bread, butter, and something faintly sweet that had settled into the wood years before he ever stepped foot inside. It wasn't perfect. The front window still carried a thin crack across the corner. The floorboards creaked in places, no matter how many times he reinforced them. And the paint, Lila had chosen the color, still showed faint streaks where the second coat hadn't fully covered the past. But it was open. Marcus flipped the small wooden sign from closed to open. The click echoed louder than it should have. Behind him, the ovens hummed softly, steady and warm. A tray of lemon rolls cooled on the rack, their glaze catching the morning light like something fragile and worth protecting. In the back room, he could hear the faint rustle of movement, his daughter turning in her sleep on the narrow cot he'd set up against the wall. For a moment, everything felt still. Then came the sound. A low engine, smooth and expensive, cutting through the quiet like it didn't belong on this street. Marcus didn't turn right away. Cars passed all the time, old ones mostly, engines that rattled or coughed or complained. This one didn't. This one purred. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, rain tapping lightly against his shoulders, and that's when he saw it. A black sedan eased to a stop directly in front of the bakery. Polished, immaculate, out of place. The kind of car that didn't get lost. It chose where it went. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, slow and heavy, like a door closing somewhere deep inside him. The back door opened. A woman stepped out, one hand steady on the frame, the other adjusting the sleeve of a tailored coat that probably cost more than everything inside Marcus's bakery combined. She stood there for a second, letting the rain touch her hair, her face like she didn't notice it at all. Then she looked up. Their eyes met. Marcus didn't move. Evelyn Carter. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since he'd last seen her across a long conference table, under bright white lights, surrounded by people who suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. 3 weeks since she had signed a piece of paper without hesitation, without question, without even looking at him. And now she was standing in front of his bakery, on his street, in the rain. Marcus swallowed, but his throat stayed tight. Evelyn's gaze moved slowly, deliberately, taking in everything, the crooked sign, the cracked window, the chipped paint, the narrow doorway. She wasn't looking at it the way someone looked at something beautiful. She was evaluating it, measuring it, like it was a number on a balance sheet. Marcus stepped forward, one hand instinctively brushing against the keys clipped to his belt. He could still feel the faint oil under his fingernails, the ache in his shoulders from nights that stretched too long and mornings that came too soon. Everything about him stood in contrast to her. and neither of them said anything. Not at first. The rain filled the silence. A bus roared past at the end of the block, spraying water across the curb. Somewhere, a siren cut through the distance. The city moved on, unaware of the moment holding still between them. Evelyn took a step closer. Her heels didn't sink into the wet pavement. They didn't hesitate. They just moved forward, precise and controlled, like everything else about her. "You," she said quietly. Not surprised, not angry, just acknowledging. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Yeah," he said. His voice was steady, lower than usual maybe, but steady. "It's me." Her eyes flickered again, this time catching on the inside of the bakery, the ovens, the racks, the faint glow of light spilling onto the floor. Something shifted behind her expression. Not softness, not yet. But something had changed. "I didn't know you were the buyer," she said. Marcus gave a small, almost humorless nod. Guess a lot of people didn't know a lot of things. The words sat between them, heavier than they sounded. Evelyn didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped past him. Into the bakery. Marcus turned, watching as she crossed the threshold, like she belonged anywhere she chose to stand. Her eyes moved again, slower this time, over the counter, the shelves, the chalkboard menu where the handwriting was uneven but careful, over the lemon rolls. For just a second, her gaze lingered there. Then it moved on. Marcus stayed by the door, the rain now behind him, his world contained within these four walls. He could feel the distance between them, not measured in feet, measured in everything that had happened before this moment. Evelyn reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the counter. She didn't comment on the imperfections. She didn't mention the obvious. But Marcus could see it. She noticed everything. "You're opening this?" she asked. Not disbelief. Not quite. But close. Marcus stepped inside, letting the door fall shut behind him with a soft click. "I already did." Another silence. The kind that builds, stretches, dares someone to break it first. Evelyn turned to face him fully now. Up close, nothing about her had changed. The same composed expression, the same controlled posture, the same calm that had filled that conference room like it belonged to her. But Marcus saw something else now, something he hadn't seen before. A question, not in her words, in her eyes. He didn't answer it. Instead, he walked past her, behind the counter, where his hands knew exactly what to do even when everything else felt uncertain. He picked up a tray, adjusted it slightly, wiped a spot that didn't need wiping. Movement, control, something he could hold on to. Then he looked up, right at her. And for the first time since she walked in, he spoke without hesitation. "We're open." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no invitation. Just a statement. Evelyn held his gaze. For a second. 2. 3. And in that space, something unspoken passed between them. Something unfinished, something unresolved, something that refused to stay buried no matter how much time had passed. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the air stayed warm, and neither of them moved. Why was she really here? The question hung in the air, quiet but heavy, like the rain outside pressing against the windows. Marcus could feel it settling into his chest, the same way something had settled there 3 weeks ago, something he still hadn't found a name for. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she glanced once more around the bakery, slower now, as if she were looking for something she hadn't seen the first time. Then she stepped back from the counter, her fingers leaving a faint mark on the wood where the polish hadn't fully dried. "I see," she said, though it wasn't clear what she meant. Marcus leaned slightly against the counter, folding his arms, not defensive, not relaxed, just holding himself steady. "You usually just drop in on people you fire?" he asked. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Evelyn looked at him again, her expression unreadable. If the question bothered her, she didn't show it. "I was in the area," she said. Marcus let out a small breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. "South Chicago?" he said. "Yeah, I'm sure that's on your regular route." For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not guilt. Something closer to recognition. But it passed quickly. "This building," she said instead, shifting the conversation with practiced ease. "It was listed through a regional estate group. We had preliminary interest in the block." Marcus nodded once, like he'd expected that. "Figures. You bought it before anything was finalized." "Yeah," he said. "That's usually how buying works." Another pause. Evelyn studied him in a way that felt familiar now. Not personal, not emotional, but thorough. The same way she had in boardrooms, in presentations, in moments where decisions got made without hesitation. Except this time, Marcus didn't feel small under it. He felt done. "You're aware," she continued, "that operating a business here comes with challenges, permits, suppliers, competition. It's not easy?" Marcus cut in. Her gaze held. "No," she said. "It's not predictable." Marcus pushed himself off the counter and walked toward the oven, adjusting a tray that didn't need adjusting. The heat brushed against his face, grounding him in something real, something present. "I'm not looking for predictable," he said. "I tried that already." The words landed harder than he intended, or maybe exactly as hard as he meant them to. Behind him, Evelyn didn't respond right away. And just like that, the memory came back. Not as a slow drift, but all at once. Bright lights, cold air, a room too clean to feel human. 2 weeks earlier, Marcus stood at the far end of a long conference table, his hands flat against the polished surface, fingers spread just enough to keep them from shaking. Around him, people sat in chairs they'd occupied for years, people he'd worked beside, joked with, trusted. None of them were looking at him. Not really. Their eyes dropped to papers, screens, anything that wasn't him. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Carter. Calm, composed, unmoved. Marcus, someone had said, he couldn't even remember who now. "We've reviewed the findings." Findings. Like it was something clinical, something clean, not something that could ruin a man's life. "There's evidence," the voice continued, "that the contamination in batch 47 was the result of internal interference." Marcus blinked. "I flagged that batch," he said. 3 times. It shouldn't have gone through at all." A few heads shifted slightly, but no one spoke. "The documentation we have," the same voice said, "doesn't reflect that." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "It should," he said. "I sent the reports. I emailed." "We don't have those records," the voice interrupted. Silence followed. Thick. Uncomfortable. Wrong. Marcus looked around the table again, searching for someone, anyone, to meet his eyes. No one did. Then he looked at her. Evelyn. She was watching him. Not cold, not angry. Just watching. Like she was waiting to see how this would play out. Marcus swallowed. "You think I did this?" he asked. No one answered. Not directly. Evelyn reached forward, sliding a document across the table. Clean, typed. Final. Her voice was steady. "Based on the information available," she said, "we're moving forward with termination, effective immediately." Marcus stared at the paper. His name sat at the top like it belonged there, like it always had, but everything underneath it felt like it belonged to someone else. "I didn't do this," he said. The words came out quieter than he expected. Evelyn didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't comfort. She simply picked up a pen and signed. Marcus watched her do it. Watched the ink settle into the paper. Watched the moment his life shifted in a way he couldn't undo. She didn't look at him when she handed it over. Not once. Back in the bakery, the memory faded just as sharply as it had come. Marcus stood there, staring at the oven, the soft glow reflecting in his eyes. Behind him, he heard movement. Evelyn stepped closer to the counter again, her heels quieter now against the worn wood. "You built this in 3 weeks," she said. It wasn't admiration, but it wasn't dismissal either. Marcus didn't turn around. "Didn't have much else to do," he replied. "That's not entirely true." He finally faced her again. "What isn't?" "You had options." Marcus held her gaze. "For who?" he asked. "Not for me." Something in that answer lingered. Evelyn's posture shifted slightly, the smallest change but enough to feel. Then, from the back room, a soft voice cut through the space. "Dad?" Marcus turned immediately. Lila stood in the doorway, her hair slightly messy, one sleeve of her oversized hoodie slipping down her arm. She blinked against the light, still half in sleep. "Are we open?" she asked. Marcus's expression softened in a way it hadn't all morning. "Yeah," he said gently. "We're open." She stepped forward, then stopped when she noticed Evelyn. Her eyes moved from the polished coat, to the heels, to the calm, composed face that didn't match anything in this room. Lila frowned slightly. "Is she a customer?" she asked. The question hung there. Simple, honest. Marcus glanced at Evelyn. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Evelyn looked down at the display, at the lemon rolls catching the light, at the faint imperfections that made them real. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." Lila nodded once, satisfied. "Okay," she said, stepping behind the counter like she belonged there. "What do you want?" Marcus watched Evelyn carefully. This wasn't a boardroom. There was no script here, no expectations. Just a man. His daughter. And a choice. Evelyn met his eyes one last time. Then he looked back at Lila. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Lila didn't hesitate. "The lemon rolls," she said. "They're the best thing we make." Marcus exhaled slowly. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a visit. It wasn't just coincidence. Something had shifted, and he still didn't know why. But he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close. Evelyn took the small paper bag from Lila's hands. her fingers brushing lightly against the warm paper, as if she wasn't used to holding something so simple. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stood there, looking down at it, like she was trying to understand what it meant to buy something that wasn't part of a deal. "Thank you," she said. Lila nodded like it was obvious. "You're welcome." Marcus watched the exchange carefully, his arms resting against the counter, his weight shifted slightly onto one leg. Something about the moment felt off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Evelyn reached into her coat, pulled out a card, then paused. "No," she said quietly, almost to herself. She put the card away and instead handed Lila a few bills. "Keep the change," she added. Lila looked down at the money, then back up. "We don't have change yet," she said seriously. "We just opened." For the first time, something real flickered across Evelyn's face. Not control, not calculation, a hint of something softer. "That's fine," she said. Lila nodded again, then carefully placed the money under the small register tray that barely worked. Evelyn turned back toward Marcus. Their eyes met. And just for a second, the noise of the city outside faded completely. "I'll be in touch," she said. Marcus didn't react. "With what?" he asked. She held his gaze a moment longer, like she might answer, but she didn't. Instead, she gave a small nod, turned, and walked out into the rain. The bell above the door didn't ring. It had broken weeks ago. The door closed softly behind her, and just like that, she was gone. Marcus stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. "Dad?" Lila's voice pulled him back. He looked down at her. "Yeah? Is she coming back?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't like not knowing the answer. "I don't know," he said. Lila considered that, then shrugged. "She should," she said. "She bought the good thing." Marcus let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "Yeah," he said. "She did." But as he turned back toward the kitchen, the question stayed with him. Why now? Why here? And why him? The rain had slowed by the time Marcus locked up that night. The street outside had emptied, leaving behind puddles that reflected the dim glow of streetlights. The bakery smelled faintly of sugar and flour, the warmth of the ovens long since faded into the walls. Lila was already half asleep in the back room, curled up under a thin blanket, one arm hanging off the edge of the cot. Marcus adjusted it gently, pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. "You did good today," he whispered. She didn't wake, but her breathing shifted, deeper, calmer. Marcus stood there for a second longer, watching her. Then he turned off the light. Outside, the air felt colder. The kind of cold that didn't bite. It settled. He locked the door, checked it twice, then walked toward the car parked half a block down. It wasn't new. It wasn't even reliable, but it was theirs. He opened the driver's door slowly, careful not to make too much noise, and sat down behind the wheel. The engine didn't start right away. It never did. He waited a second, turned the key again. This time, it caught. The heater rattled weakly to life, pushing out air that took its time warming up. Marcus leaned back in the seat, one hand still resting on the wheel, the other rubbing absently at the scar on his thumb, a habit he didn't notice anymore. His eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty now. But for a few nights, it hadn't been. The memory came back without warning. Same car, same street, different kind of silence. 2 weeks earlier, Lila had been asleep in the back, her head resting against a folded jacket, her breath fogging up the window in small, steady clouds. Marcus sat exactly where he was now, but everything felt heavier then. The world had closed in around him in ways he couldn't explain. He had driven for hours that night. No destination, no plan, just movement. Because stopping felt like giving up. He remembered pulling over near a bus stop, the flickering overhead light casting uneven shadows across the pavement. The bench had been empty, the street quieter than usual. Lila had stirred in the back. "Dad?" she murmured, her voice soft and confused. "I'm here," he said immediately. She pushed herself up slightly, blinking against the darkness. "Are we home?" The question hit harder than anything that had happened in that conference room. Marcus swallowed. "Not yet," he said. She looked around, taking in the unfamiliar space, the cramped seat, the faint smell of old fabric, and something worn down by time. "Where are we going?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't have a good answer, so he gave her the only one he could. Somewhere new. She studied him for a second longer than a kid her age should have. Then she nodded. Okay. That was it. No fear, no questions, just trust. She laid back down, pulling the jacket closer around her shoulders. Marcus stared out at the empty street, the glow of the bus stop light flickering slightly, as if it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give out completely. He hadn't slept that night. He hadn't slept much at all those first few days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that conference room again. The paper, the pen, her signature, the silence. Back in the present, Marcus exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible over the hum of the engine. He glanced once more toward the bakery down the block. It looked different at night, smaller, more fragile, but it was still there. He was still there. That had to count for something. He shifted the car into gear, pulling slowly away from the curb. As he drove, the city moved around him in familiar patterns. Late-night diners still open, a few people walking under umbrellas, the distant sound of music from somewhere he couldn't see. Life going on, unchanged, unaffected. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel just slightly. He had lost everything once: job, reputation, stability. And yet, he had still found a way to keep going, to build something, to show up. Even when no one expected him to, even when no one believed he could. But now she was back. Evelyn Carter, the one person tied to the worst moment of his life. Standing in his bakery, buying his food, saying she'd be in touch, Marcus shook his head slightly, like he could clear the thought away. But it stayed. Because deep down, he knew something had shifted, and shifts like that didn't happen without a reason. He just didn't know what it was yet. And that uncertainty, that was the part that kept him awake. Because if she was back in his life now, then whatever came next wasn't going to be simple. The next morning came in slow, gray layers. Marcus woke before the sun had fully pushed through the clouds, the kind of early where the city still felt half asleep. The bakery was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the distant hum of traffic starting to build somewhere far off. He stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, staring at the same spot he had cleaned 3 times the night before. He hadn't slept much, Evelyn's face kept showing up in his mind. Not the one from the conference room, but the one from yesterday. The way she had stood there. The way she had looked at the bakery. Like she was trying to understand something. Marcus exhaled and pushed himself away from the counter. There was work to do. There was always work to do. By the time Lila woke up, the ovens were already warming, filling the space with a low, steady heat. The smell of dough beginning to rise wrapped around the room, soft and familiar. She shuffled out of the back room, dragging her feet slightly, her hair tangled from sleep. "Did we sell out?" she asked, her voice still thick. Marcus glanced over, a small smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Not even close," he said. She nodded like that made sense, then climbed up onto the stool behind the counter, pulling the hoodie tighter around her shoulders. "Are we going to have more people today?" she asked. Marcus paused for just a second. "I hope so." Lila looked toward the door. "What about her?" Marcus knew exactly who she meant. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a tray and slid it into the oven. "I don't know," he said finally. Lila didn't push. She rarely did. That was something Marcus had noticed over the past few weeks. She asked questions, sure, but when she sensed there wasn't a good answer, she let it go. He wasn't sure if that made things easier or harder. The morning passed slowly. A couple of people came in, mostly neighbors, curious, cautious. A man in a work jacket bought a coffee and stood by the window, sipping quietly before leaving without a word. A woman from down the block asked about hours, nodded, and said she'd be back later. It wasn't much, but it was something. Marcus moved through it all with steady hands, doing what he knew how to do. Measure, mix, watch the timing, adjust the heat. Things that made sense, things that didn't change on him. By noon, the sky had cleared just enough for the light to break through the clouds, spilling into the bakery in long, uneven lines. It hit the counter, the racks, the chalkboard where Lila had carefully written out the menu in letters that leaned slightly to the right. Everything felt fragile, like it could tip one way or the other without warning. The door stayed closed for a while. Too long. Marcus wiped his hands on a towel, glancing at the clock, then at the door, then back to the oven. Don't think about it. Just work. That's what he told himself. It worked. For a little while. Until the phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet, sharp, and unexpected. Marcus frowned, reaching for it. "Rosie's Bakery," he said. There was a pause on the other end, then a voice, professional, flat. "Mr. Reed?" Marcus's grip tightened slightly. "Yeah. This is First County Bank. We're calling regarding your pending loan application." Marcus straightened a little. "Okay." There was another pause, the kind that told you something before the words even came. "We regret to inform you that your application has been denied." The words landed clean. Too clean. Marcus blinked. "Denied," he repeated. "Based on a recent review of your financial profile and employment history, we are unable to proceed at this time." Marcus stared at the counter, at a small crack in the wood he hadn't noticed before. "Is there a reason?" he asked. "We are not authorized to disclose further details." "Of course." Marcus let out a slow breath. "Right," he said. "If your circumstances change, you are welcome to reapply in the future." Marcus almost laughed. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll keep that in mind." He hung up. For a second, He just stood there, the phone still in his hand. The bakery felt quieter now. Heavier. "Dad?" Lila's voice came from behind the counter. He turned. She was watching him, her eyes sharp in a way that didn't match her age. "What happened?" Marcus hesitated. Then he set the phone down. "Nothing we can't handle," he said. She studied him. "You say that a lot." He nodded. "Yeah. Is it true?" Marcus walked over, resting his hand on the counter. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Then he said the only thing he could. "It has to be." Lila held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "Okay." That was it. No fear. No panic. Just that same quiet trust. Marcus turned back toward the kitchen, but something had shifted. The loan was gone. That meant no extra supplies. No repairs beyond what he could manage himself. No cushion. He was walking a line now, and it was getting thinner. The afternoon stretched on. The light faded slowly, turning gold, then dim. A few more customers came and went. Not enough. Never enough. By evening, Marcus was back in the kitchen, hands deep in dough, working through the motions even as his mind moved somewhere else. He was thinking about numbers, about time, about how long he could keep this going without something giving out. The door opened again. Marcus didn't look up right away. "Be right with you," he called. No response. Just footsteps. Measured. Familiar. Marcus froze. Slowly, he wiped his hands and turned. Evelyn Carter stood just inside the door. No rain this time. No hesitation. Just her. Again. Marcus exhaled, something between disbelief and frustration. "Didn't expect to see you twice," he said. Evelyn stepped further in, her eyes moving briefly around the room before settling on him. "I said I'd be in touch." Marcus leaned against the counter. Most people mean a phone call when they say that. She didn't react to the edge in his voice. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a folder. Thin. Precise. She placed it on the counter between them. "I think you should look at this," she said. Marcus didn't move. "What is it?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Something you were never supposed to see." The room went still. Lila looked between them, sensing the shift without understanding it. Marcus stared at the folder. Every instinct told him not to touch it, not to open it, not to let whatever was inside pull him back into a world he had just barely escaped. But something else, something deeper, made him step forward. Slowly, carefully. His hand hovered over the folder, then stopped. He looked up at Evelyn. "What is this really about?" he asked. She didn't look away. "It's about what happened to you," she said. Marcus's jaw tightened. That already happened. Evelyn shook her head, just slightly. "No," she said. "It didn't." Silence filled the space again. And this time, it felt like something was about to break. Marcus looked back down at the folder, then at his hands, then at his daughter, watching him from behind the counter. And for the first time since he opened the bakery, he wasn't sure what the next right move was. Because whatever was inside that folder might change everything. Marcus didn't move. The folder sat between them, thin but heavy, like it carried more weight than it had any right to. The overhead light caught the edge of it, reflecting off the smooth surface in a way that made it look almost clean. Too clean. like the document that had ended everything. Lila shifted slightly behind the counter, her fingers resting on the edge, her eyes moving between her father and the woman standing across from him. She didn't speak, but Marcus could feel her watching. Waiting. Marcus let out a slow breath and pulled his hand back. "No," he said. Evelyn didn't react. Not surprised. Not disappointed. Just still. Marcus shook his head once, firm. "I'm not doing that again." "What do you think this is?" Evelyn asked quietly. Marcus looked at her, something sharper in his eyes now. "I think it's another piece of paper with my name on it," he said. "And I think I've had enough of those." The words weren't loud, but they landed hard. Evelyn held his gaze, and for a moment, the calm she carried seemed to shift, just slightly. "This isn't a termination notice, Zhao," she said. Marcus gave a small, humorless smile. "Doesn't matter what it is," he replied. "It's still coming from you." That did it. Something in her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough that Marcus noticed. The distance she usually kept between herself and everything else seemed thinner now. "I didn't come here to hurt you," she said. Marcus let out a breath. "You already did." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything that hadn't been said 3 weeks ago. Full of everything that couldn't be undone. Lila stepped closer to the counter, her voice soft but steady. "Dad." Marcus didn't look at her. "Not yet." "I'm working," he said quietly. Lila didn't move. "You always say to check things before you throw them away," she said. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. That landed. Because she was right. And she knew it. He opened his eyes again, slower this time, and looked down at the folder, then at Evelyn, then back at the folder. His hand moved before he fully decided. He picked it up. It felt light, too light. He opened it. Inside were printed documents, neatly organized, clipped together. The first page had his name on it. He almost closed it right there. But he didn't. He started reading. The bakery disappeared. The city outside disappeared. It was just him and the words. The first document was an internal report. He recognized the format immediately. Quality control logs, batch tracking, approval signatures. Batch 47. His chest tightened. He flipped to the next page. Emails. His emails. Or at least, they were supposed to be. Marcus frowned, leaning closer. The timestamps didn't match what he remembered. The wording felt wrong. He turned another page, and then he saw it. A gap. 2 missing entries. Right where his final warning should have been. His fingers tightened around the paper. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. Evelyn didn't answer right away. "Keep reading," she said. Marcus did. Further down, another document, an audit trail. System access logs, user IDs, and one name that kept showing up again and again. Not his. Someone else. Marcus's eyes moved faster now, scanning, piecing things together. Files altered, emails deleted, approvals overridden. His jaw clenched. "This isn't real," he said. "It is," Evelyn replied. Marcus shook his head, stepping back slightly. "No," he said. "No, this is something you pulled together after the fact to make it look I didn't create any of it." Marcus looked up at her sharply. "Then who did?" Evelyn held his gaze. Brent Mallory. The name landed like a weight. Marcus's mind moved quickly, pulling pieces together. Brent, COO, always in the background, always watching, always involved. He built the case against you, Evelyn continued. He controlled the documentation that went to the board, including the report I signed. Marcus stared at her. You're telling me, he said slowly, that everything that happened was based on this? Evelyn nodded once. Yes. Marcus laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't carry any humor. So what? He said. You made a mistake? Evelyn didn't flinch. No, she said. I made a decision without verifying the information. Marcus shook his head, pacing now, the papers still in his hand. That's not a mistake, he said. That's negligence. The word hung in the air. Evelyn didn't argue, because she couldn't. Lila watched her father, her small hands gripping the edge of the counter. Dad, she said again, softer this time. Marcus stopped. He looked at her, then back at the papers, then at Evelyn. So what now? He asked. You came here to tell me you messed up? That I was right all along? No, Evelyn said. Marcus waited. She stepped closer, just enough to close the distance slightly, but not enough to invade his space. I came here because it's not finished, she said. Marcus frowned. What isn't? What happened to you? Marcus let out a breath. It's finished for me, he said. I lost the job. I lost the reputation. I lost everything that came with it. He gestured around the bakery. This is what I have now. Evelyn followed his gaze, taking in the space again. The imperfections, the effort, the quiet strength it took to build something like this from nothing. It shouldn't have cost you that, she said. Marcus looked back at her. But it did. Another silence. He felt it in his chest this time. Not anger. Not exactly. Something heavier. Something harder to name. What do you want from me? He asked. Evelyn shook her head. Nothing. Marcus didn't believe that. No one comes back like this for nothing, he said. Evelyn's expression shifted again, just slightly. I'm not asking you to trust me, she said. I'm not asking you to forgive anything. Marcus said nothing. I'm telling you the truth, she continued, because you deserve to know it. The words settled into the room. Simple, direct, unavoidable. Marcus looked down at the papers again, at his name, at the missing emails, at the evidence that had been taken from him before he even had a chance to defend himself. His grip loosened slightly, then tightened again. Knowing doesn't change what happened, he said. Evelyn nodded. I know. Doesn't get me my job back. I know. Doesn't fix what people think about me. A pause. Evelyn held his gaze. No, she said. But it can. Marcus froze. What? Evelyn didn't look away. This isn't over, she said. The words echoed, not loud, but clear. Marcus felt something shift again, deeper this time. Dangerous. Hope. He didn't want that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was there, and he couldn't ignore it. Lila stepped forward, her voice quiet, but certain. Dad, she said, if it's the truth, shouldn't people know? Marcus looked at her, really looked, then back at Evelyn. And for the first time since she walked into his life again, he wasn't just reacting. He was thinking, because If this was real, if this was the truth, then everything he had been carrying, everything he had accepted, might not belong to him after all. And that thought was harder to face than anything else, because it meant one thing. He hadn't lost everything. It had been taken. The thought didn't bring relief. It didn't bring comfort. It brought something sharper, something heavier. Marcus stood there, the folder still open in his hands, the papers trembling just slightly, not from weakness, but from everything trying to settle at once. Taken. That meant it hadn't been his fault. That meant all those nights, all those hours sitting in silence trying to figure out where he went wrong. They had been built on something false. And somehow, that hurt more. Because if it wasn't his failure, then it had been someone else's choice. And that kind of truth didn't sit easy. Marcus closed the folder slowly, pressing it flat against the counter, like he could quiet it just by holding it still. "You waited 3 weeks," he said, his voice lower now. "Why?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I didn't have proof before." Marcus shook his head. "You had enough to sign that paper." That landed. Evelyn's posture shifted just enough to show it had. "I had what I was given," she said, "and I didn't question it the way I should have." Marcus let out a breath, sharp this time. "Yeah," he said, "that's one way to put it." Lila looked between them again, quieter now, sensing the weight of the moment without needing to understand all of it. The bakery felt smaller, like the walls had moved in just a little. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. Evelyn met his eyes. "I fix it." Marcus gave a short laugh. "You can't fix this." "Yes," she said, "I can." He stepped away from the counter, pacing once across the narrow space, the floor creaking under his weight. "You don't just fix something like that," he said. "People talk. They decide who you are, and that's it. They can change their minds." Marcus stopped. He looked at her like she had just said something impossible. "Not where I come from," he said quietly. Silence again. But this one felt different. Because now, there was something underneath it, something moving. Evelyn didn't push. She didn't argue. She just stood there, steady, like she had already decided something Marcus hadn't caught up to yet. Then, from somewhere deeper in the bakery, a loud creak broke the moment. Marcus turned instinctively. One of the shelves near the back had shifted slightly, the wood settling unevenly from the repairs he'd rushed through the week before. He moved quickly, setting the folder down and crossing the room in a few steps. "Stay back," he said to Lila. But she was already watching carefully, her small hands gripping the counter again. Marcus reached the shelf and pressed against it, testing the weight. It leaned slightly forward, unstable. He grabbed a nearby wrench and tightened the bracket as best he could, the metal groaning slightly under pressure. "Almost," he muttered. Evelyn had followed, stopping just short of the kitchen entrance. "You reinforced it?" she asked. Marcus didn't look at her. "With what I had." "That's not enough." Marcus tightened the last bolt and stepped back. "It is for now." Evelyn studied the shelf, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "This place needs more than for now," she said. Marcus turned, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Yeah," he said, "I'm aware. You don't have the resources to—" "I didn't ask for help," he cut in. Her voice stayed calm. "I'm not offering help." Marcus paused. That caught him. "What are you doing then?" he asked. Evelyn stepped forward, closer to the counter again, her gaze steady. "I'm making sure what happened to you doesn't happen again." Marcus stared at her. That sounds a lot like help. It's not about you, she said. That hit wrong. Marcus's expression hardened. Then what is it about? Evelyn didn't flinch. It's about the truth. Marcus held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Right, he said. The truth. But something in his tone said he wasn't convinced. Not yet. The door opened suddenly. The bell still didn't ring. A man stepped inside, shaking rain off his jacket, his boots leaving damp marks on the floor. Marcus recognized him. Gary, supplier from 2 counties over. He had called last week, promising to bring flour and sugar once Marcus got things up and running. Hey, Gary said, glancing around. Looks like you got the place going. Marcus nodded. Trying to. Gary stepped closer, then hesitated when he noticed Evelyn. His posture shifted immediately. Respect. Caution. Something else. You got company? He asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer that. What did you bring? He asked instead. Gary shifted his weight. About that. Marcus's chest tightened slightly. Gary rubbed the back of his neck. I'm going to need payment up front, he said. Full amount. Marcus frowned. That wasn't the deal. Gary shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Things change. Marcus took a step forward. What things? Gary hesitated again. Then he said it. I heard some stuff. There it was. Marcus felt it settle in. The rumor, the label, the version of him people had already decided on. What stuff? Marcus asked, even though he already knew. Gary glanced briefly at Evelyn, then back at Marcus. Just business stuff, he said. Look, I'm not saying I believe it, but I gotta cover myself. Marcus stood still. Very still. And what exactly are you covering yourself from? He asked. Gary didn't answer, because he didn't have to. It was already clear. Marcus exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said. I get it. He reached into his pocket, pulling out what little cash he had. It wasn't enough. Not close. He knew that before he even counted it. Gary saw it too. That's not gonna do it, he said. Marcus nodded. I know. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Then, without warning, Evelyn stepped forward. I'll cover it, she said. Marcus turned sharply. No. It came out fast. Firm. Evelyn didn't back down. It's a transaction, she said, not a favor. Marcus shook his head. I'm not taking your money. It's not about you taking anything. It is to me. Their eyes locked again. This time the tension was different. Sharper, closer to breaking. Gary shifted awkwardly between them. I can come back later, he said. Marcus didn't look at him. Yeah, he said. Do that. Gary nodded quickly, backing toward the door. All right. Yeah. I'll check in. He left just as fast as he came. The door closed behind him, silence again. But this time, it wasn't quiet. It was loud in a different way. Because now Marcus could see it clearly. The damage hadn't stopped when he lost the job. It had followed him. Everywhere. Into every conversation. Every deal. Every chance he thought he still had. And standing in the middle of it was the person who could change that. He looked at Evelyn. Not with anger, not with trust. Something in between. "You really think you can fix this?" he asked. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Yes." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You don't know what this is like," he said quietly. Evelyn's voice softened, just slightly. "No," she said, "but I'm going to." That answer stayed with him, because it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a decision. And for the first time since she walked back into his life, Marcus realized something. She wasn't just here to explain the past. She was here because something bigger had already started. And whether he liked it or not, he was right in the middle of it. The next few days didn't explode. They tightened slowly, quietly, like something unseen was pulling a wire tighter around everything Marcus had just begun to build. The bakery opened each morning the same way. Marcus unlocking the door, flipping the sign, turning on the ovens before the sun fully rose. Lila would sit on her stool, legs swinging slightly, rewriting the menu in careful chalk lines as if each letter mattered. And it did, because it was all they had. The smell of bread drifted out onto the street again. A few more people stopped in. A construction worker bought coffee every morning. A young couple came by twice in the same week. A mother with 2 kids asked if Marcus could make something without nuts. Little things. Small steps, but they were moving forward. Until they weren't. It started with the suppliers. Marcus stood behind the counter late one afternoon, phone pressed against his ear, listening to a voice he barely recognized anymore. "I'm sorry," the man said. "I can't extend credit." Marcus stared out the front window, watching a bus roll past, its windows fogged with bodies and breath. "We've worked together before," Marcus said. "You know I pay." "I know," the man replied, "but I've heard things, and I can't risk it." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. "What things?" he asked, even though the answer was already there, sitting in his chest. A pause. "You know how it goes," the man said. "Word gets around." Word gets around. Marcus let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he said, "it does." He hung up slowly. The bakery felt colder, even with the ovens running. He placed the phone down carefully, like it might break if he didn't. "Another one?" Lila asked. Marcus looked at her. She wasn't looking at her chalkboard. She was looking at him, yeah, he said. She nodded once. Okay, that was all. No complaint, no fear, just acceptance. And somehow, that made it worse. The next day, it got worse. Marcus arrived early, the sky still dark, the streetlights buzzing faintly overhead. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stopped. There was a piece of paper taped to the counter. White. Official. Too clean. His stomach dropped before he even touched it. He pulled it free and read. Notice of temporary suspension. His eyes scanned the lines. Unapproved structural modifications. Pending inspection. Immediate halt to renovation activity. Marcus stared at the words. They didn't make sense. He hadn't touched anything that required permits beyond minor repairs. Floorboards, shelves, cosmetic work, nothing structural, nothing that should have triggered this. He read it again anyway, because sometimes if you read something twice, it changes. This didn't, Dad? Lila stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Marcus didn't answer. Not right away. He folded the paper slowly, set it down, then turned to her. "We're closed today," he said. Lila blinked. "Why?" Marcus hesitated. "Someone says we have to be." She frowned. "Who?" Marcus didn't have a good answer, so he didn't give one. Just someone. Lila looked at the paper, then back at him. "Is it wrong?" she asked. Marcus followed her gaze. "No," he said. "Then why do they get to decide?" The question hung there, simple, sharp, and impossible to answer. Marcus ran a hand over his face. "I don't know," he said. But deep down, he had a guess. The rest of the day stretched long and quiet. Too quiet. Marcus spent it sitting at the counter, the notice in front of him, his hands folded together like he was trying to hold something in place. Lila drew at the far end, her crayons spread out, humming softly under her breath like nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. Because this wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was pressure. Systematic. Precise. And there was only one person who could reach this far. Marcus leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling. Evelyn Carter. The thought came uninvited, unwanted. But it stayed. Because it made sense. Too much sense. She had the access, the influence, the reason. She had walked into his bakery, seen everything, offered nothing. And now, this. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't want to believe it, didn't want to go there. But the pattern was forming whether he liked it or not. That evening, just as the light outside began to fade into that dull gray blue that came before night fully settled in, the door opened. Marcus didn't look up at first. "Closed," he said. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Familiar. He froze. Then he looked up. Evelyn stood there. Again. No umbrella this time. No hesitation. Just her. Marcus pushed himself to his feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You've got a lot of nerve," he said. Evelyn stopped a few feet from the counter. "I heard about the notice," she said. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you did." Her expression didn't change. "I'm not behind it." Marcus stepped forward. "Yeah?" he said. "Then who is?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. "I'm looking into it." Marcus shook his head. "No," he said. "You don't get to look into it." Evelyn held her ground. "You think I came here to shut you down?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "I think you came here because you realized I wasn't going to fold," he said. "So now you're making sure I don't have a choice." The words hit harder than anything he'd said before. Even Lila stopped drawing. Evelyn's eyes sharpened, just slightly. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Marcus demanded. Silence. For a second. 2. 3. Then Evelyn stepped closer. Not aggressively, but deliberately. "Someone is trying to make sure this place doesn't open," she said, "and it's not me." Marcus stared at her. "And I'm supposed to just believe that?" "No," she said. "You're supposed to decide." Marcus shook his head again. "That's real convenient." Evelyn's voice dropped slightly. "Marcus." He flinched at his name, not visibly. But enough. "I know what this looks like," she said. "But you're wrong." Marcus's hands curled into fists at his sides. "I was wrong once," he said. "That was enough." The words hung between them. Heavy. unfinished. Evelyn didn't move, didn't push, but something in her expression shifted again. Not defensiveness, not anger, something else, something closer to determination. "I'm going to fix this," she said. Marcus laughed, sharp, tired. "You don't get to fix everything," he said. "No," she replied, "but I can fix what I broke." That stopped him, just for a second. But it was enough, because in that moment, Marcus saw it. Not power, not control, but something real. And that made it harder. Because if she wasn't the one behind this, then someone else was. Someone who didn't care about right or wrong. Someone who didn't care about truth. Someone who was still out there. Pushing, pressing, tightening the line. Marcus exhaled slowly. Then he looked at Evelyn again. Really looked this time. And asked the question that had been sitting just beneath everything else. "If it's not you," he said, "then who's trying to shut me down?" Evelyn didn't answer. Not yet. But the way she looked at him said she already knew. Evelyn didn't speak right away. The silence stretched, thick and deliberate, like she was weighing something heavier than the words themselves. Marcus waited. Lila watched, and outside the wind picked up slightly, rattling the loose chain on the bakery sign with a dull, uneven rhythm. Finally, Evelyn exhaled. "It's Brent," she said. The name settled into the room like something unwelcome. Marcus didn't react immediately, not outwardly. But inside, something shifted. Again. "Brent Mallory," she continued. COO. Marcus let out a slow breath, nodding once. "Yeah," he said. "I remember him." Of course he did. Brent had been the one asking the questions during the investigation. The one who had nodded thoughtfully at the wrong moments. The one who had made it sound like Marcus's answers weren't quite enough. "Why?" Marcus asked. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice quieter now. "Because if the truth comes out, it doesn't just clear you," she said. "It exposes him." Marcus leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "So he's cleaning up loose ends." Evelyn didn't disagree. Marcus looked down at the notice still sitting on the counter, then back at her. "Shutting down a small bakery in South Chicago seems like overkill," he said. "Not if it's tied to something bigger," Evelyn replied. Marcus frowned. "What bigger?" Evelyn hesitated, just long enough for Marcus to notice. "Tell me," he said. She met his eyes. "The product launch you were blamed for. It wasn't just a mistake," she said. "There were contracts tied to it. Investors. Deadlines. If that batch had been stopped, it would have cost the company millions." Marcus let that sink in. "And I flagged it," he said. "Yes." "And he ignored it." "Yes." "And then made it look like I caused it." Evelyn nodded. Marcus let out a breath, shaking his head slowly. "So now," he said, "if people find out I was right..." "He loses everything," Evelyn finished. The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was clarity. And that made it worse, because now Marcus knew exactly what he was up against. Not bad luck, not random setbacks. A person, a system, a decision that had been made long before he ever had a chance. Lila stepped closer, her voice small but steady. "So, he's trying to stop us?" she asked. Marcus looked at her, Then back at Evelyn. Yes, Evelyn said gently. Lila nodded once, like she had expected that answer. Okay, she said. Marcus blinked. That's it? He asked. She shrugged. We just don't let him. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. If it were that simple. Evelyn watched the exchange, something unreadable passing through her expression. Then she turned back to Marcus. The permit can be reversed, she said. The complaint doesn't hold up under review. Marcus shook his head. Then why is it still in place? Because someone pushed it through fast, she said, and now it has to go through the process to come back. Marcus leaned forward slightly. How long? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. That depends. On what? On how hard someone keeps pushing against it. Marcus let out a breath. So we're stuck. For now. The words hit harder than they should have, because Marcus knew what for now meant. Time. And time was the one thing he didn't have. The bank had already pulled back. Suppliers were stepping away. Now the permit. Everything tightening. Everything closing in. Marcus turned, walking slowly toward the oven, his hands brushing against the counter as he moved. He opened it. The heat hit him in the face. He stared inside for a second, then closed it again. I can't afford for now, he said quietly. Evelyn stepped closer. I know. Marcus turned back sharply. Do you? He asked. Do you know what it's like to run out of time? Evelyn didn't flinch. No, she said. But I know what it's like to make a decision that costs someone everything. That stopped him. Just for a second. But it was enough, because she wasn't deflecting. She wasn't avoiding it. She was standing in it. Marcus exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. What are you going to do? He asked. Evelyn's voice was steady. I'm going to push back. Marcus let out a short laugh. You think that's enough? No, she said, but it's a start. Marcus shook his head again. That's not going to stop him. Evelyn met his gaze. No, she said, but it will slow him down. The words hung there, and Marcus realized something. This wasn't a clean fight. There wasn't going to be a moment where everything flipped back into place. It was going to be slow, messy, uncertain. And in the middle of it, he still had a bakery that couldn't open. That night came heavy, the kind of night that settled into your bones before you even realized it was there. Marcus sat on the floor of the bakery, his back against the wall, the notice still folded in his hand. The lights were off. Only the faint glow from the street filtered in through the cracked window. Lila sat beside him, her head resting lightly against his arm. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The building creaked softly around them, the old wood shifting with the drop in temperature. Finally, Lila broke the silence. Dad? Marcus didn't move. Yeah? Are we still opening? The question was soft, careful, like she already knew the answer might hurt. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. He stared at the opposite wall, at the faint outline where the paint hadn't fully covered the past. I don't know, he said. It was the first time he had said it out loud. The first time he hadn't given her certainty. Lila didn't respond right away. She just sat there, thinking. Then she shifted, sitting up straighter. We already fixed it, she said. Marcus looked at her. What? She pointed around the room, the walls, the oven, the floor, she said. You fixed all of it. Marcus swallowed. That's different. Lila shook her head. No, it's not. He frowned. It is, Lila. She looked at him, her eyes steady. It's still broken, she said. You just fix it again. The simplicity of it hit him harder than anything else that day. Because she believed it. Completely. No doubt. No hesitation. Just belief. Marcus let out a slow breath, leaning his head back against the wall. For a moment, everything inside him felt tired. Worn down. Like he had been running uphill for too long without a break. But then, something shifted. Not big, not loud, just enough. He looked around the bakery again. At the walls he had painted, the floor he had repaired, the oven he had fought to get working again. All of it. Still standing. Still there. Despite everything. Marcus exhaled. Then he pushed himself up off the floor. Lila looked up at him. What are you doing? She asked. Marcus reached for the light switch. He flipped it on. The room filled with warm yellow light. I'm not done, he said. The words felt different this time. Stronger, more certain. Lila smiled. A small one, but real. Marcus walked toward the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves. The permit might be suspended. The money might be tight. The system might be pushing back. But none of that changed one thing. He was still here. And as long as he was still here, he could keep going. Even if it didn't make sense. Even if it didn't feel fair. Even if it didn't work out the way he hoped. Because sometimes, the only thing you could do was keep building anyway. And somewhere across the city, someone else was doing the same. Evelyn Carter sat alone in her office, the city lights stretching out beyond the glass walls behind her. The folder lay open on her desk. Marcus's name at the top, the missing emails, the altered records. All of it. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, scrolled, stopped on a name. Brent Mallory. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she pressed call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Evelyn didn't leave a message. She ended the call. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for someone else to act. She was about to make the first move. And when she did, everything was going to change. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. Her office sat high above the city, all glass and quiet, the kind of space designed to make decisions feel clean, but nothing about what she was holding felt clean anymore. The folder was still open on her desk. Marcus Reed. His name sat there like something she couldn't look away from. She leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the documents, replaying the past 3 weeks. Not the version she had accepted, but the one she was beginning to see. The gaps, the missing emails, the altered approvals, and the way Brent had presented everything so efficiently. Too efficiently. Evelyn reached forward and picked up one of the printed pages again, her fingers tracing over a line she had already read 5 times. User access log, timestamp, deletion entry. Brent Mallory. The pattern was no longer subtle. It was deliberate, careful, and hidden just well enough that no one looking quickly would have caught it. Evelyn exhaled slowly. She had signed that termination. She had made that decision. Not because she wanted to hurt Marcus, but because she had trusted the system, and the system had failed. No, she corrected herself. She had failed. Her phone buzzed softly against the desk. A message from her assistant. Board meeting moved to Thursday. Brent requested early review session. Evelyn stared at the message for a moment. Of course he had. He knew something was shifting. Maybe not everything, but enough. She stood slowly, walking to the window. Below her, the city stretched out in patterns of light and shadow, people moving through their lives unaware of the decisions being made above them. Marcus was down there somewhere, in that small bakery, fighting something he couldn't even see. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. Decision made. The next morning came sharp, cold, precise. The kind of morning where everything felt like it was waiting for something to happen. Marcus was already at the bakery when the first light hit the street. The ovens were on, the smell of dough rising again, the same routine, the same effort. Because even without the permit, without the suppliers, without the support, he wasn't stopping. Lila stood on her stool, erasing yesterday's menu and rewriting it carefully. "Are we still opening today?" she asked. Marcus didn't hesitate this time. "Yeah," he said. She looked up at him. "But the paper said—" "I know what the paper said," he interrupted gently. "We'll figure that part out." Lila nodded slowly. "Okay." She went back to writing. Marcus watched her for a moment, then turned back to the oven. He didn't know how he was going to figure it out. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going backwards. Not again. The door opened just after 9. Marcus didn't look up right away. "Morning," he called. No answer. He wiped his hands and turned. It wasn't Evelyn. It was someone else. A man in a dark coat holding a clipboard. Official. Neutral. The kind of presence that didn't need to raise its voice to be taken seriously. "Marcus Reed?" the man asked. Marcus nodded. "That's me." The man stepped inside, glancing around briefly. "I'm here regarding the permit suspension." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Yeah," he said. "I figured someone would come by eventually." The man checked something on his clipboard. "We've received updated documentation," he said. Marcus frowned. "From who?" The man didn't answer that. "Based on the review, the suspension is being lifted." Marcus blinked. "What?" The man looked up. "You're cleared to continue operations," he said. "Effective immediately." The words didn't land right away. Marcus just stood there. "Say that again," he said. "The suspension has been lifted." Marcus glanced at Lila. She was staring at the man like he had just spoken another language. "What changed?" Marcus asked. The man flipped a page on his clipboard. "Clarification on the scope of the repairs," he said. "Documentation was submitted confirming no structural violations." Marcus stepped closer. "I didn't submit anything." The man nodded slightly. "I'm aware." Marcus's mind moved quickly. There was only one person who could have done that. He looked toward the door instinctively, but it stayed closed. The man handed him a copy of the updated notice. "You're good to go," he said. "Just make sure everything stays within guidelines." Marcus took the paper slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I will." The man gave a brief nod and turned to leave. The door closed behind him, silence. Lila jumped off the stool. "Dad," she said, "we can open." Marcus looked down at the paper again, then back at her. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, we can." But something about it didn't sit easy, because he hadn't done this. And things like this didn't just fix themselves. Lila didn't care about that. She ran to the door and flipped the sign to open with a small, proud smile. Marcus watched her, then looked back at the paper, then at the empty doorway Evelyn. It had to be. But she hadn't said anything, hadn't asked for anything, hadn't even shown up. And somehow, that made it more complicated. Across the city, Evelyn sat at the long conference table, the same one where everything had started. The board members were already seated. Brent Mallory sat halfway down, his posture relaxed, his expression confident. Too confident. Evelyn placed her folder on the table. Not the same one she had shown Marcus. This one was thicker, heavier, complete. "We're here to review the internal findings," she said, her voice steady. Brent nodded slightly. "Of course," he said. "I've already provided a full report." Evelyn looked at him. "I know," she said. Then she opened the folder. And for the first time since this all began, she didn't hesitate. Because this wasn't about protecting the company anymore. It wasn't about protecting herself. It was about the truth. And the truth was finally ready to be heard. Back at the bakery, the first customer of the day stepped inside, then another, and another. The smell of fresh bread filled the air again. Lila stood behind the counter, handing out bags, her voice steady, her smile real. Marcus moved through the kitchen, his hands working, his mind still catching up. Because something had changed. The pressure hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. And for the first time in days, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning. But he knew better than to trust it too quickly. Because if someone had pushed this hard to shut him down, they weren't done yet. Not even close. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature, in tone. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, the city skyline stretching behind her like a backdrop that no longer mattered. Around her, the board members sat in their usual places, composed, practiced, waiting. Brent Mallory leaned back slightly in his chair, one arm resting along the edge, his expression calm. Too calm. "You wanted an early review," Brent said, his voice smooth. "I assume this is about the harbor situation?" Evelyn didn't sit. She didn't rush. She simply opened the folder in front of her and let the pages settle. "This is about the product launch investigation," she said. A few heads shifted. Brent's expression didn't. "That's already been concluded," he replied. "We followed protocol." Evelyn looked at him. "No," she said. "We followed a version of the truth." Silence. Subtle, but immediate. Brent's posture straightened slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said. Evelyn reached into the folder and pulled out the first document. An audit log. She slid it across the table. "User access records," she said, "for the batch approval system." Brent glanced at it briefly, then back at her. "And?" Evelyn didn't blink. "You accessed the files tied to batch 47 6 times in a 2-hour window," she said, "including 2 deletion entries." The room stilled. Brent's jaw tightened just slightly. "That doesn't prove anything," he said. Evelyn placed another document on the table. "It proves you altered the record." A board member leaned forward. Altered how? Evelyn turned the page, revealing the comparison. Original timestamps. Missing emails. Gaps. The warnings submitted by Marcus Reed were removed, she said. Specifically, the final report flagging the batch as compromised. The name hung in the room. Marcus Reed. Brent exhaled slowly. That's speculation, he said. We don't have the original messages. Evelyn met his eyes. I do. That landed hard. She placed another sheet down. Printed clear. Undeniable. The email. Time-stamped. Unedited. Marcus's words. A direct warning. A call to stop the batch. The room shifted. You could feel it. Brent didn't reach for the paper. Didn't need to. He already knew. Where did you get that? He asked. Evelyn's voice didn't change. Backup servers you didn't think anyone would check. A long silence followed. Then one of the board members spoke. Are you saying the termination was based on incomplete information? Evelyn didn't hesitate. I'm saying it was based on manipulated information. The word echoed. Manipulated. Brent leaned forward now, his calm finally cracking just enough to show something underneath. This is reckless, he said. You're undermining the company over a single employee. Evelyn shook her head. I'm correcting a decision I made without full context. Brent's voice sharpened. And what do you think this does to us? He asked. To our credibility, to our investors. Evelyn held his gaze. It restores it. The room went quiet again. But this time, it felt different, because the balance had shifted. Brent knew it. Evelyn knew it. And now, so did everyone else. Back in South Chicago, Marcus stood behind the counter, watching as another customer walked out with a paper bag in hand. The bakery was fuller today. Not crowded, but alive. The smell of bread filled the air, warm and steady, wrapping around the space like something that refused to leave. Lila moved behind the counter with quiet confidence, handing out orders, taking small bills, stacking them carefully. "You're out of cinnamon rolls," she called. Marcus glanced at the rack. "Give me 10 minutes," he said. She nodded. "No rush," she replied. But there was something in her voice. Something lighter. Hope. Marcus turned back to the kitchen, his hands moving through the motions again, mixing, shaping, placing trays into the oven. Work. Real. Tangible. Not like everything else swirling around him. But even here, he could feel it. The shift. The pressure hadn't disappeared. It had just moved. And that meant something was happening. Somewhere. He wiped his hands and stepped back into the front room. "Need anything?" he asked Lila. She shook her head. "I got it." He watched her for a second longer, then looked toward the door. Half expecting it to open. Half expecting her to walk in again. But it didn't. Not yet. Across the city, the boardroom tension finally broke. "We need to vote," one of the members said. Brent stood abruptly. "This is premature," he said. "We need a full internal review before making any decisions." Evelyn didn't sit, didn't step back. "We've had 3 weeks," she said. That was enough time for the wrong conclusion. She placed one final document on the table. A statement. Prepared, clear. This acknowledges the error, she said. It clears Marcus Reed of all responsibility and restores his professional standing. The words hung there, heavy, necessary. Brent stared at the paper. This opens us up to liability, he said. Evelyn nodded. Yes, she said. And you're willing to accept that? Evelyn didn't hesitate. Yes. That was it. That was the moment. Because in that single word, everything changed. The board looked at each other, measured, calculated. Then, one by one, they nodded. Back at the bakery, the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. Marcus stood near the window, watching the street. A familiar black sedan slowed as it turned onto the block. His chest tightened. It didn't stop. It kept going. Marcus exhaled slowly. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed, because whatever was happening out there, it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. And when it finally reached him, he knew one thing for certain. It was going to change everything. Again. The morning came in quietly. No rain, no wind, just a pale stretch of light easing its way over South Chicago, brushing against rooftops and broken sidewalks, settling gently on the front window of the bakery. Marcus was already awake. He had been for hours. The clock on the wall read 4:12 a.m. When he stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands steady over the counter. The world outside was still dark, but inside the oven glowed warm and alive. This wasn't just another day. He could feel it. Something had shifted the night before, not just out there, in boardrooms and offices and decisions he wasn't part of, but here, inside him. The pressure hadn't disappeared, but it wasn't crushing him anymore. It was pushing. Forward. He lined up the recipe cards he had written out himself, each one worn slightly from use, edges bent, flour smudged across the corners, brown butter bread, cinnamon rolls, lemon rolls. He paused at that one. Lila's favorite. The one she insisted was the whole point. Marcus let out a small breath, almost a smile. All right, he said quietly to himself. Let's get it right. The first batch went in just before 5. The smell came slowly, then all at once. Warm, sweet, alive. It filled the space, pushed into the walls, drifted toward the door like it had somewhere to be. By the time the sun fully rose, Lila was awake, sitting on her stool with a pencil behind her ear, like she'd seen someone do once and decided it meant something important. Are we really opening today? She asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said. This time, it felt different. Not forced, not hopeful. Certain. Lila studied him for a second. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. She turned the chalkboard around and rewrote the menu from scratch. Cleaner, straighter, better. Marcus watched her for a moment, then turned back to the oven. At 7 a.m., he walked to the front door. His hand rested on the handle. He took a breath. Then he unlocked it. The sound echoed louder than it should have. He flipped the sign, open, and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. The street was quiet. A car passed. A man walked by without looking in. Marcus stood there, hands at his sides, feeling the weight of the moment settle. Then, the door opened. A woman stepped in, shaking off the morning chill. Diane. from the flower shop down the block. She smiled as soon as she saw him. "I was wondering when you'd get this place going," she said. Marcus nodded. "Today's the day." She looked around slowly, her eyes softening. "It smells like it used to," she said quietly. Marcus didn't know what that meant exactly, but it sounded like something good. "What can I get you?" he asked. Diane stepped up to the counter. "One of everything," she said. Lila grinned. "That's a lot." Diane winked. "I've got neighbors." The first sale felt different. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. Someone believed enough to walk in, to stay, to buy. And then more people came. A man from the construction site, the young couple from earlier in the week, a woman with a stroller who paused, then stepped inside after catching the smell from the street. The line didn't grow fast, but it grew steady. And that was enough. Marcus moved between the kitchen and the counter, his hands working without hesitation now, each motion confident, practiced. Lila handled the front, her voice clear, her smile real. "Next," she said, "we still have lemon rolls." And people listened. They always did. Because something about her made them believe her. At 9:30, the line reached the door. Marcus stepped out from the kitchen for a moment, wiping his hands on a towel, his chest rising and falling just a little heavier than before. He looked around. The bakery was full. Not packed, not overwhelming, but full of life, of sound, of something that hadn't been there before. And then, the door opened again. Marcus didn't need to look. He felt it. The shift, the quiet, the subtle change in the air. Evelyn Carter stepped inside. No coat this time. No sharp edges. Just a simple jacket, her hair pulled back, her presence still commanding, but different. Less distant. More human. She didn't walk straight to the counter. She stepped into line, behind everyone else. Marcus noticed. So did Lila. "Dad," she whispered. Marcus nodded slightly. "I see her." Lila watched for a second, then turned back to the next customer. "Next," she said. No hesitation, no special treatment, just the same. When Evelyn reached the front, she looked at Lila first. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Lila didn't miss a beat. "The lemon rolls," she said. "They're the whole point." Evelyn nodded. "I'll take 2. Lila packed them carefully, placing them into a small paper bag like it mattered. Because it did. Evelyn handed over the money. "Exact." Then stepped aside. She didn't leave. She found a small table near the window, the one with the faint crack running through the glass, and sat down. For a while, she didn't eat. She just watched. Watched the people coming in. Watched Marcus moving through the kitchen. Watched Lila behind the counter, steady and sure. Then, slowly, she opened the bag, took one of the lemon rolls, and tasted it. She paused. Just for a second. Something shifted across her face. Not dramatic, not obvious, but real. Marcus saw it from across the room. And for the first time since she walked back into his life, he didn't feel anger. He didn't feel tension. He felt something else. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something closer to understanding. He stepped out from the kitchen and walked toward her. He didn't sit. He just stood there, hands at his sides. "The board called," he said. Evelyn looked up. "I know," she replied. Marcus nodded. I heard what happened. Evelyn didn't explain, didn't justify. I did what I should have done the first time, she said. Marcus let that sit. Then he nodded once. Yeah, he said. You did. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Evelyn held his gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded and went back to her coffee. Marcus stood there for a second, then turned, back to the kitchen, back to the work, back to what mattered. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking backward. He was standing in something real, something he'd built, something no one could take away. And outside, the line kept growing, slowly, steadily, like something that wasn't going anywhere. Not this time. The days that followed didn't feel like a miracle. They felt like work. Real work. The kind that didn't announce itself with big moments or loud victories, but showed up quietly, in early mornings, in tired hands, in the steady rhythm of something being built piece by piece. Rosie's bakery stayed open. Every day. Marcus arrived before sunrise, just like he had on opening morning, and Lila followed soon after, her hair tied back a little neater now, her handwriting on the chalkboard sharper, more confident. The line didn't disappear. It didn't explode either. It just stayed. People came back. That was the difference. The construction worker started bringing a coworker. The young couple told their friends. Diane from the flower shop stopped by almost every afternoon, always with the same quiet smile. And every time someone walked in, the bell above the door still didn't ring. But it didn't matter anymore, because the place had found its own sound. The soft murmur of voices, the scrape of chairs, the low hum of the oven, the rhythm of something real. Marcus stood in the kitchen one morning, watching a tray of bread rise, his hands resting lightly on the counter. He didn't rush anymore, didn't second-guess every step. He just worked. Because now, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about keeping something alive. Lila leaned against the doorway, watching him. "You're smiling," she said. Marcus glanced over. "I am?" She nodded. "A little." He looked back at the oven. "Guess I forgot how that feels." Lila shrugged. "It's better than not smiling." Marcus let out a small breath. "Yeah," he said. "It is." The door opened. Footsteps. Marcus didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. He already knew. Evelyn Carter had become part of the rhythm. Not every day, not even most days, but enough that her presence didn't shift the room anymore. It settled into it. She walked in quietly, no longer scanning the place like it was something to measure or evaluate. Now she just entered, like everyone else. Lila looked up first. "You want the usual?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "The usual." Lila smiled slightly and turned to prepare it. Marcus stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Evelyn stood by the counter, her posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been before. Different. Less guarded. "The statement went public," she said. Marcus paused. He had been expecting that. Still, hearing it out loud made it real. "Yeah," he said. "I saw." The news had spread faster than he thought it would. Online articles. Local coverage. A company acknowledging an internal failure. clearing the name of a man who had been quietly carrying the weight of something that was never his. It didn't fix everything, but it changed something. People had started looking at him differently, not with suspicion, not with distance, with respect. And that was new. "They're investigating Brent," Evelyn added. Marcus nodded slowly. Figured that was coming. Evelyn watched him carefully. "You could pursue further action," she said. "Legal options, compensation." Marcus shook his head. "Maybe," he said, "but that's not what I'm focused on." Evelyn glanced around the bakery, at the people, at the life inside it. "I can see that," she said. Lila returned with the bag, placing it gently on the counter. "The lemon rolls," she said, "still the best thing we make." Evelyn smiled. "A real one." "I believe you," she said. She took the bag and stepped aside, heading toward her usual table by the window. Marcus watched her go for a second. Then he turned back to the kitchen. Work didn't stop. It never did. But something inside him had changed. The weight he had carried for weeks, months, was gone. Not erased, but lifted. Because now, the truth was out there, and it wasn't his to carry anymore. Later that afternoon, when the crowd had thinned and the light had softened into that warm, golden tone that made everything look a little more forgiving, Marcus stepped outside. He leaned against the doorframe, looking out at the street. The same street, the same cracked pavement, the same buildings. But it didn't feel the same, because he wasn't the same. He had been knocked down, labeled, pushed out. And somehow, he had built something anyway. Not because it was easy, not because it made sense, but because he didn't stop. Lila stepped beside him, holding a half-eaten roll. "Dad?" "Yeah?" She looked up at him. "Are we okay now?" Marcus thought about it, about everything that had happened, about everything that had changed. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said. "We are." She smiled, small, certain, and went back inside. Marcus stayed where he was for a moment longer. The air felt different, lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. And real was enough. Inside, Evelyn sat by the window, watching the street. The bakery reflected faintly in the glass beside her. She didn't belong here, not really, but she wasn't out of place anymore either. She had come back to fix something, to correct a decision. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else. Not redemption, not exactly. Something quieter, something earned. Marcus stepped back inside, the door closing softly behind him. He caught her reflection in the glass, then looked away. Because some things didn't need to be said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The bakery continued. The ovens stayed warm. The door kept opening. And a man who had once lost everything stood in the middle of something he had built with his own hands. Not perfect, not easy, but his. And that was enough. Because in the end, a person's worth isn't decided in a boardroom. It isn't written on a report. It isn't taken away by someone else's signature. It's built. Quietly. Patiently. In the work you choose to keep doing, even when everything else is taken from you. And sometimes, that kind of work doesn't just rebuild a life. It changes it. Forever. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever had to start over when it wasn't your fault, or keep going when everything said you shouldn't, you're not alone. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. When Lila stood behind that counter and told every single customer, the lemon rolls, that's the whole point. She wasn't just talking about the recipe. She was reminding her father why he never gave up. This story isn't about winning in the end. It's about choosing to keep showing up, even when the world already decided who you are. Because sometimes the real power isn't in being proven right. It's in refusing to become bitter when you were wronged. So today, think about one moment in your life where things felt unfair. And instead of walking away, do one small thing anyway. Keep going, just like Marcus did. Because sometimes that one quiet decision is what rebuilds everything. If this story touched you, comment one below. And tell me, have you ever kept going even when nobody believed in you? There's another story coming up, and this one might hit even closer than you expect.